Exactly 1 month ago, Nicolas Maduro was removed from power in Venezuela. Since then, Venezuela has entered a period of rapid and significant transition that continues to unfold, frankly, in real time. While much of the discussion online and the news cycle is focused on the large-scale international implications of Maduro's removal, it's crucial to focus on what this moment looks like on the ground for Venezuelans, the people that matter most, which is what we're doing in this event today. Good morning, all, and thank you for joining us this morning for this important conversation. Today, we will recenter the discussion on Venezuela toward local voices who will speak to the situation in the country, such as what Venezuelans are feeling and what stories might matter right now. I'm Jason Marzek, Vice President and Senior Director at the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arsht Latin America Center. This event is part of our Venezuela Forward series, the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center's steady stream of Venezuela-focused programming, where we shed light on the country's future through ideas that promote economic stabilization and a democratic future for Venezuela. As part of our Venezuela Forward series and marking 1 month since Maduro's removal, today we will also be publishing a memo to the president on Venezuela, and which we will outline key priorities and ask that the U.S. should make to Delcy Rodriguez's government in order to ensure there is economic recovery and transition. We are also releasing a video today that demonstrates the dire economic situation in Venezuela, showcasing how inflation and low wages in the country are affecting Venezuelans across the country and how desperately we need economic revival. Today's discussion will shift our focus to the realities being faced by Venezuelans on the ground and stories that may often be lost or perhaps neglected in the global discussion around the future of Venezuela. The conversation will focus on the lived experiences of Venezuelans today, how daily life has changed or is changing, what journalists are reporting on, and what needs are becoming more visible 1 month into this transition. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome our speakers today, all joining us from Caracas. Carolina Alcalde, who is a Venezuelan journalist and former Caracas correspondent for Voice of America. Joining us as well is Guillermo Aveledo, professor of political and economic thought in Venezuela at the Universidad Metropolitana. He's also at the Universidad Central de Venezuela, and Claudia Niken, a professor of law at the Universidad Central de Venezuela and former executive secretary of the delegation of the Unitary Platform of Venezuela. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I'd also like to let our audience know that if you have questions for the speakers, please feel free to go ahead and submit those using askac.org. That's askac.org. I'd like to begin the conversation by getting a lay of the land of what people in Venezuela are feeling and experiencing in the moment. And with that, Carolina, I'd like to start with you. As a reporter in Caracas, you lived through some of the most important moments in recent Venezuelan history, including the important moments that we've seen thus far this year. Given the media frenzy around these events, what kind of stories are you finding yourself prioritizing or encountering most often on the ground?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. From my position as a freelance reporter working for international media, I am prioritizing major political and diplomatic developments, especially public reactions, because events are still unfolding and there is not full clarity about what comes next. In Venezuela, this is especially important because traditional local media report very little on these issues due to the censorship and self-censorship that we are living since many years ago. And as a result, many people go to social networks or international media to understand what is happening. So reporting from Venezuela also means that big announcements are always filtered through daily reality. The main question on the ground is what actually changed in people's life. Because yes, a lot have changed, but people's problems are still there, are the same. And I think this is sometimes missing in conversations outside. I often report also on political shifts, such as the amnesty law, the release of political prisoners, and renewed diplomatic engagement, but also on how people react to those developments. There is a clear mix of emotions, uncertainty, of especially fear and cautious optimism between people. So what headlines focus on big political moments, stories on the ground are or really should be about how people manage expectations and continue with their everyday life.
So, Carolina, one of the things you mentioned is cautious optimism and managing expectations. If you could draw out a little bit more of how you're seeing that playing out in your conversations with people as these bigger stories are unfolding.
Yes, because people is still afraid to speak, to talk, and that's why there is a lot of caution optimism. People think that maybe it's going to be a change in Venezuela, a transition, but I mean, they don't have something concrete at the moment. Of course, many things have happened, but I think that people is still waiting for more concrete, facts and not just words.
Excellent. Thank you, Carolina. I want to move to Guillermo. Guillermo, from a structural perspective, as we continue to get a look at kind of the lay of the land, how would you describe the overall landscape Venezuela is operating now within 1 month into this new period?
Well, in actual terms, and what we see of the behavior of the state and the government apparatus, it's business as usual. I mean, it's despite the massive external shock that occurred a month ago, the status quo has sort of persisted. The overall change in the cabinet and the military leadership has been sort of selective and very there have been no persecutions or purges of large scale purges so far. And as to the day-to-day operations of the state is as efficient and inefficient as it's traditionally been. There's no real change in turnover or in operation. And the water is still going out, the electricity is still getting blackouts, and nothing is changing in that regard. But still, if I have to say this in a more cultural and more social point of view, that sense of learned hopelessness that we Venezuelans always have with Chavismo and change has sort of faded out. Like we're feeling more hopeful. However, weird that sense of just of justice is playing out now because of the events, and however muted the expressions of that hope are so far. The issue is that we are feeling that perhaps this is the time that really change is going to come, that change is going to occur, that the avenues of change are opening, and the thawing is slow. The thawing is incremental, but still everyone is sort of testing the waters, and so the regime is also testing the waters of how much can it remain the same without providing too much change that will, give everything away.
Guillermo, can you explain a little bit more on this important what you're sharing as far as kind of testing the waters? Both the people are testing the waters, the government is testing the waters. How are you, maybe as your conversations with people day to day, how are you seeing that kind of play out in the way that people are approaching this moment with all different actors kind of testing what this new period looks like?
Well, you can see it in social behavior. When we have not had any massive demonstrations, but people are in general supportive of the demonstrations that are taking place. Those demonstrations that by students, by the relatives of political prisoners that are pressuring the government actually to move forward towards an opening up, a liberalization. That's something that's going on. Moreover, if you see the people are not celebrating but not sad. They are sort of remaining in their day-to-day work and moving on with their lives, but still hoping that things will change. And we see this on the government as well. The government is not retorting to their traditional tactics. The government moved very swiftly to post control of the situation in the first few days after the events of January 3rd. And with a display of power, of internal power. But beyond that, it has sort of recanted that. There are no more police stoppings. I mean, not general police stoppings, and there are no more searches of phones. There have been no mass arrests since January 3rd. there have been there's the release of political prisoners, that it's going up in a pace that it's beyond anything that happened before in similar situations in the century. So things are going on, and the government is saying, well, how much control can I pose without things going getting out of hand? And that's what we're seeing now.
Thanks, Guillermo. Let me move to Claudia. So, Claudia, 1 month in, how would you characterize the current state of Venezuela's institutions as they function on a day-to-day basis?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Atlantic Council for the space linked to the possibility to talk from the ground about some difficult subjects, as Carolina and Guillermo have already done. My English is not so good, so excuse my faults. Straightforward to the point, there is a principle according to which no matter what, state institutions keep functioning or should keep functioning. And that's exactly what's going on in Venezuela, as Guillermo has already told. Of course, we already had dysfunctional institutions, and this is the way they keep going. But with an enormous difference resulting, of course, of the events of January 3rd. As you're asking about the current state, Venezuela's institutions as they function on a day-to-day basis, concerning the main state institutions, we can see progressive but quick changes. For example, there is a likely intention to enhance, as possible as it is, the administration's efficiency. But and then we can see how the cabinet is being changed. But it doesn't exclude the changes coming from the need to enhance also equilibrium and stability in the administration. Okay. Also, the National Assembly appears to have shifted or turned from the idea of changing the whole legal framework to discuss a more limited agenda that should include an amnesty law. And we will see the next few days how the Supreme Court board changes. In any case, there are big expectations, mostly in the economic field, not only because of the general belief that economic growth is inevitable, but also because of the perceived necessity that for some core institutions to adapt to a new economic reality.
Claudia, can you share a little bit more? I want to pick up on that last point. Institutions adapting to the new economic reality. Can you explain a little bit more of how you see that and what that could potentially look like?
Yes, it's we have this economic opening. For the moment, is only in paper, but it's going to happen. At least in the oil industry, oil and gas industry. But as it has been raised by American and other oil companies, they need more than laws or licenses to come back to Venezuela and invest or to grow their investments. They need some other signs of legal security. And of course, the biggest guarantees for that are those that come from a rule of law system that we don't have. So we should expect that some kind of changes should happen in the managing, at least, justice, even if we are opening also for arbitration, international arbitration, because there are matters that cannot be solved in an arbitration. and also some legal changes that has been announced in the law regarding work, work contracts or contracts itself, public contracts. I don't know. I don't really. I cannot really, advance what's going to happen. But there are things that should happen. In the tax, also in the tax field, general taxes field, Banco Central de Venezuela, etc.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much, Claudia. I want to shift back to you, Claudia, and as we continue looking at kind of local perspectives, and I want to bring in, as we continue to look at institutions as well, what are you seeing as some of the elements of maybe the institutional framework that appear most resilient right now, and perhaps even if you want to bring in how communities might be adapting to this change at the local level to the elements of institutions that appear most resilient, or some of that questioning of which direction institutions might be going.
Well, I think this is a hard question to ask from my point of view as a lawyer and as a law professor, etc. Because what we can see, it's a fact, is that our supposed institutional framework does not exist anymore. There is another one that we don't know. We don't know for sure. I mean, there has been a major event on January 3 that has changed the basis of this institutional framework. So I think that this is something that we need to understand, as to understand also how institutions can endure or function in these times. So institutions right now are adapted already to a new reality.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, if these adaptations helps them to keep going, as I said, because it's a principle based on reality, they must keep going. But is it what we want? Is it what we need? Is it what we're willing as a country? And there are all the difficulties we can find. And I don't see right now any changes between, I mean, in the interaction between institutions and the people. But this wait and see attitude that from the people and from the institutions also, everybody's waiting and to see what happens. And I think this is a good thing.
And Claudia, maybe I'll trip back to Guillermo here, because Guillermo, you were also wait and see. Claudia mentioned that, and you were also mentioning that there's this testing the waters right now. And so I'd love to go back to you on institutions as well. And where are you seeing insofar as the structural limitations that could shape how this period unfolds, given the fact that we're in such a unique moment in Venezuela, don't exactly know how this moment is going to exactly unfold. Lots of expectations, lots of hope. But what are you seeing insofar as limitations, or maybe some of the even kind of opportunities that you're seeing right now of how to help to usher in the, Secretary Rubio has mentioned the stability, recovery, transition as part of a 3-phase plan. how are you seeing kind of institutions being able to adapt to that plan, or the willingness to be work alongside that plan?
Well, as you mentioned, Mr. Rubio has set stability as the main priority right now on the first phase of operations in Venezuela by the current government, and the instruction that the uh, that Washington has set for Ms. Rodriguez. And if this is the priority, this runs in tension to the many challenges and many demands that she will face, and also with her own and his brother, the Rodriguez brothers, reform agenda. They've been the paramount uh, um, promoters of a reform agenda from Chavismo for many years right now. And if they're seeing as pragmatic, if they're seeing as modernizing, how this will run to the structural limitations they have. And I should address this. Does the state have the fiscal largesse, the human capital to address the many challenges it has? Does it have enough teachers, enough doctors, enough nurses, enough public servants who are well paid, who are professional, who are able to work and face these challenges? Does Ms. Rodriguez have the actual tools of governance to rule and then to quell any tensions that she will face? Because the demands are there. I mean, the population and however muted and however patient might be, is still holding a number of demands towards a system that ultimately will clash with that priority of a stabilization. And we're in a sort of paradox. If society demands too much, we as a society might endanger the very perilous path towards a democratic transition that we're facing now, because we're just in the early, very early stages of that. And in a way, we have to take care not to rock the boat too much against Ms. Rodriguez's government, and not to put too much pressure on her, but also Ms. Rodriguez has to show that she's willing to address those grievances. And there are limitations to that, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
The state capacity and the fiscal largesse.
Guillermo, I'd like to draw you out a little bit more. It's an excellent point. I mean, you mentioned this fiscal capacity, the challenges, the tools, the personnel. I mean, so many 8 million, Venezuelans have left the country. A lot of extremely competent professionals, and so it seems like many of that talent will be necessary for a recovery in the country. There's also the question of the money that comes in through the oil sector, and President Trump has been very vocal about saying that money was going to reach the people, which is vital. But how do you see that actually being able to play out once, and kind of the state's willingness to have that money reach the people when it actually comes back to Venezuela, and even the ability for it to reach the people, given state capacity issues?
Would be easy for me to question the state's willingness to do that because of this our story, our history of corruption, our history of mismanagement. But even if we grant the full reformist agenda of the Rodriguez brothers and the power brokers that are in place, I fail to see that they have the actual capacity to move it forward. Like, can they actually, pay up their way to do this? The state of the country is so dire in social services, in utilities, in actual governance, that it's I don't know which issues would Ms. Rodriguez tackle first. She's mentioned water, and she's put water in her priorities instead of the water services and the distribution of water around the country as a main priority that's mentioned that just last week. And yet she's moving forward towards the very same framework that caused the actual shortages in the country, the centralization of the different local water plants and water services. And I don't see that she has, and the current state has the capacity. However, her will is there. So I think this might put in danger and jeopardize her own priorities, her own stabilization priorities.
Thank you. Caroline, I want to go back to you and talk about local concerns. And I'd like to get your perspective on how are you seeing local concerns perhaps differing from the narratives that tend to dominate in international reporting. And maybe a parallel question to that came through askac.org, which is how are Venezuelans perceiving the role of international actors at this moment? So I think the two questions are very much related, and I'd love to get your perspective on both.
Yes, well, on the ground, people is talking about the change of rate of the dollar, about how expensive the food is, the life is, about extremely low wages. The minimum wages is less than $1. Also about bonuses are not enough, and the need to find alternative sources of income just to survive. There are the same problems faced before Maduro's removal, but there is more hope that those problems get solved soon. At the same time, there is cautious optimism. I repeat these phrases because that things could change, especially if the economic situation improves, because oil is not longer sold with discount. There is also hope that oil revenues will be monitored by the United States, which could bring more transparency, what at least is what people think about it. People is also talking about power outages, water shortages, as Guillermo said, and if it's safe to speak openly. There are cautious conversations about recent political signals, always framed by the question, will this actually change our daily lives, or will there be a real democratic transition? So daily life continues, business are open, children go to school, sometimes outside they don't remark that. Routines go on, but under a constant atmosphere of tension and fatigue because people is very tired.
Mm-hmm. And Carolina, you said I hope that problems get solved soon. And Guillermo was also speaking about this delicate balance of societal demands, given the hope that this moment presents. In your conversations, how much time are people giving that things will get solved? Is there an expectation that power outages, water, other things will be solved in, that there'll be improvements in 3 months or 6 months? I mean, what type of leeway are people giving in their expectations that there will be tangible improvements in their day-to-day lives?
Well, I think that nobody have the answer. Nobody have a period of time, delimited, because many things have to happen yet in order to start to see that changes. But I think it's too early to draw that kind of conclusions, and people know it because they know that in 1 month things can change. But I think that we'll still have to wait to have that answer.
Excellent, thank you. Guillermo, I'll go back to you and ask, as we're looking ahead to the next 3 months, the next 6 months, what questions do you think will matter most for understanding whether this transition is taking hold structurally, right? Whether the momentum that we're seeing right now, that this will continue for the longer term. What are you seeing insofar as what we should be thinking about, what questions we should be asking to know whether there is a long-term sustainability to this moment of transition?
Well, if the measure of success of this transition is the first phase of stability, we have to wait, for instance, what we'll see in the military promotions mid-year. If there's a strong overhaul of the military leadership by then, we have to wait and see whether there the legalization of political parties, and there's movements toward the return of exiles, which is a step further from the release of political prisoners. We have to see if there's signs of less censorship in the media. That's a very important factor to see whether it goes in the direction of democratization. Because if the measure of success is just stability, it's very simple. The fact that nothing might happen is the measure of that success. But if the measure of success is the move towards a democratic transition, it's too early to tell. And I'm just providing a very telling point to me on this regard. The government announced a new oil bill, given the new situation and new demands, and announced the oil bill. And in a matter of days, if not hours, that oil bill was presented to Congress, to the National Assembly, and approved in the first discussion, and then steamrolled. The Socialist Party can do that. It has an overwhelming majority, but still, it was a matter of almost hours in the Congress procedural matters. And yet you have the amnesty announcement, which is already 4 days old, and nothing has moved towards the National Assembly. It's the political opening is much slower than the economic opening, and so we have to wait and see. But I'm optimist, but cautiously, as Carolina has insisted.
And you also make an important point, Guillermo, when looking at the new hydrocarbons law, the lack of a democratic process, right? That it can just be a large expectation that it moves quickly through the National Assembly, but it also shows the kind of the control of the PSUV to make things happen when they want it to happen.
Yes.
Claudia, do you want to comment on that?
No. I just agree. It's just the PSUV has the does the PSUV have the will to change, or it's just changing what it's convenient?
And Claudia, I want to go back to you. As you're looking ahead to other small but meaningful changes that you're watching that could signal larger trends and how communities and institutions interact in this new period of Venezuela without Maduro?
Well, I think that it's too little. It's a too little change, but I think it's meaningful, and it's a change of attitude that I already pointed out, which is to wait and see. And I think this is a change of attitude from the society, and also from every or almost every actor in Venezuela, because uncertainty is a rule, in fact. Okay, and we are. How did you say, Guillermo, about hopelessness? Culturally hopeless. we have been there for many years, and we don't believe at anything. We are completely skeptic to everything, and move from skepticism to attacking every possibility. But I think that there is something that I wanted to point out, which is very important also to move forward in this process from this very early stage of stabilization to build an actual transition process, which is the de-escalation of language. And this is very marking because it's a de-escalation that comes from the Venezuelan authorities and from the US government. Of course, this is a de-escalation that is more noticeable between them, but also in Venezuela, even if there is, of course, still a very loud language, political language from the side of the government, there is a de-escalation of language, which is progressive and little, but it is. But I think this de-escalation, as it was pointed out already, needs to be joined by opening of the free speech in Venezuela. We need kind of neutralizing the public media. And by neutralizing, I mean, well, opening its doors for other voices other than Chavismo supporters' voices. We need to stop weaponizing the private media, to stop censorship. But in order to that, also the political opposition and the civil society and the society needs to de-escalate speech, because we have reached levels of hate speech that are not going to help us in this process. We cannot build a house of justice on resentment. We cannot do that. And I think that it's an idea that is growing, but very slowly. And but we need to understand that as a society, as citizens, as authorities, and also as political leaders, as opposition political leaders, we can manage to make a claim, a legitimate claim.
Thank you so
with
much.
hatred.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Caroline, I want to go to you with the last question. As you're looking in the near term, what should audiences be paying closer attention to, maybe international audiences, with regard to what is happening on the ground?
Well, I think outside audiences should pay close attention to implementation and concrete results, not just announcements, because trust will depend on that implementations. Signals like the discussion on amnesty law, the release of some political prisoners, etc. But what matters most on the ground is whether these steps are going to real changes in institutions and in a daily life. For example, as usual, the National Assembly is meeting today, Tuesday, and the discussion of the law, the amnesty law, that was supposed to be a priority, is not on the agenda, at least at this moment. So that's a signal. Another key issue is how people continue to self-censor and manage fear, especially because no elections have been announced. That says a lot about where trust is truly being rebuilt. Maduro is no longer formally in power, but the political and institutional power structure that supported him remains. So people are very aware of this, and that explains the caution, again, when expressing opinions. So people need certainty that the pattern of repression will not continue.
Well, with that, Carolina, we are at time, and I want to thank you, thank Guillermo Aveledo, thank Claudia Niken, all three of you, for not only joining us over the last 45 minutes for this important conversation, and look forward to more such conversations with you, but to all the important work that you continue to do, and we here at the Atlantic Council at the Adrian Arch Latin America Center will continue to raise attention, awareness to how this new period in Venezuela is actually affecting the lives of everyday Venezuelans. So thank you again so much for all three for joining us today from Caracas. And thanks to our audience for tuning in today, and wish you a great rest of the day.